Okay, good morning. This is day number 126 to describe a day or thought in the life of schizophrenic Dominic. I experience schizophrenia, but I do not believe I am diseased or crazy. I believe it is a reality to be experienced and that I have been warred upon. People drove me crazy and then told everybody that I was diseased or crazy, and they inflicted schizophrenia on me. I've written a book on medium.com that describes some information about in the public domain about voice hearing. It's a little bit of research about that. It documents my thought processes, which could have gotten me targeted in the first place, and information about my analysis as a research subject in the state-sponsored targeted individual program and whatever that was. I think it's a counterintelligence program. And day 17 of these videos, I describe why I call myself schizophrenic rather than targeted individual. In day 45, I have a 3-minute intro that gives a reason why I make these videos in the first place. Alright, so one thing I do sometimes on here is I describe synchronicity or feedback from the government or people in society or the public, and like gang stalking and stuff. And I got a couple of things to talk about on that front this morning. The first of which was that Karen Bass gave a press conference in which she described what was going on with the supposed riots or the revolution, whatever you want to call it, happening in LA in response to the ICE raids. And she was saying that it was all an experiment, that she referred to it as a giant experiment, and that she didn't like that her city was picked out to be part of this experiment when they didn't ask to be part of the experiment. And that is something that resonates with a lot of people in society, I think, who are being experimented on by these mind control programs and schizophrenics, being experimented on. They gave me those weird little things right now as I was talking about this to discredit. So I thought that was an interesting choice of words by the mayor. And I will say that part of what's going on in this whole ICE thing and stuff is an experiment on me. And that's one thing I don't like about what happened to me. It was like I was put out into an experiment and I never asked to be part of the experiment. And, it messes up your life and stuff. All right, I've talked about that before. I don't need to go into that. Second synchronicity was yesterday. I was talking about there's synchronicity in Gavin and Trump saying that I would arrest Gavin, and me saying I would have been tempted to throw a bottle at an ICE agent. And as I exited that video, I went out into my living room and the CNN was on. And on the news was the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively defamation lawsuit. And Blake Lively won. And I knew Justin and Anna Blake, who were kind of my friends when I was younger, and they both went into like military or police or whatever. And and I knew two Justins. One was connected to like Israel, and the other was in like so. And I knew two Blakes in it, and so I knew Justin and Anna Blake, who were friends, And so that's kind of, I guess there's some sort of messaging about Justin and Blake Lively or whatever. And uh, also, they're telling me not to be like a Justin. And it's kind of confusing, but I don't really understand it too much. But, anyways, there's a Dominic Patten who is like a leader of labor unions in Hollywood or something. And so he was on the news talking about what was going on, and he's got a bald head, and he had a Captain America picture up on his thing, and he had a Mount Nelson Mandela, and I was talking about the Mandela effect for a few days here, so I thought that was kind of interesting, and uh, you know, they like to refer to me as general sometimes or something like this, like some sort of joke or something. I'm not militaristic or something. Uh, anyways, so there was a Dominic Patten on the TV, and he had a bald head. It's supposed to be like a white supremacist, which is what they call me a lot of times. I'm totally not, and you could tell by when you listen to me that I'm not. But like that's what ICE counterintelligence thing that this whole thing was trying to make me out to be, and so that's the defamation aspect of it, and yeah, so Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, and I'm supposed to be Justin, and Blake Lively is supposed to be this lady that had a love interest or whatever, and we're supposed to be suing each other, and I don't think we're doing that. So, uh, and it was some joke thing or whatever, and they're talking about like me suing the government is like being like if I sued the government for the targeted individual program or my schizophrenia, that it would be like I would be like Justin, I'm a drama queen or something. All right. Anyways, so that was another synchronicity. Third synchronicity. I can't think of it at the moment. Uh, so I'm gonna get into something else. In my Clanlands book, uh, it discusses Wellington boots tossing a hunt. They toss the longest Wellington boot toss. It's a sport in New Zealand, some foolish sport in New Zealand. And someone's tossed a Wellington boot 180 yards. So I thought that was kind of funny. Not this random thing that I read about the other day. In my Olajuwon book, it talks about how Olajuwon was playing with the military when he was very young, and that's how he learned to play. He played against military veterans, and the whole national team was basically all in the military, the Nigerian military. And Olajuwon commented that he wasn't good enough to make the national team when he first made the national team. He said he was lucky. He was really young, and he didn't know a lot about basketball. I think he'd been playing basketball for a few months or something, and he made the national team. And uh, he said I wasn't good enough, and I thought that was a very humble thing to say. Uh, but I guess when you start something, you're not very good at it. So it's human too that he recognized that. In When the Earth Was Green book, this book right here, I'm going to read something out of this book, and it discusses the fact that the life that we come from is 1 billion years old, or two, and even further, like billions of years old. And so it discusses how like what happens in the past and like what we're doing right now with our life as living Earth or whatever, that we are shaping what's going to happen to life in the future. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And it said, all the changes among these living things, from how they gather food to what conditions are most suitable for them to thrive, are setting up the shape of life in hundreds of millions of years to come afterward. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. Like, we always think like we're setting up life for like, the Native Americans talk about 7 generations. And it's like science finds that that's a good concept because it's in line with the fact that what we do in life now, we're shaping what's coming in hundreds of millions of years from now. And uh, obviously what we do for the next 7 generations will affect that, and it made me think about like how quick life can change now, like with what they're finding, like they can edit genes, they can edit DNA. I just saw something the other day where they were editing the DNA of a child with a disease and they eliminated their genetic disease. And it's the breakaway civilization supposedly has access to all this medical, if there is a breakaway civilization, and there seems to be something along those lines with you look at the classified section of reality, and they they have like a technology to heal and do things, and our profit system helped create these technologies, but they're keep the problem one one problem with there's a lot of problems, but the one problem with the for-profit system is that it's keeping us from accessing them, and it's like select few people get access to these breakthrough treatments, and yeah, so that's one problem with our system, and that's what I was thinking. And to get into the breakaway civilization, I was going to share something that I read. I guess I'll skip ahead to, I want to get this in this video. The talk I was reading about an Unacknowledged by Stephen Greer, and it's about UFO and ET contact. And he interviews 800 whistleblowers within the government intelligence structure, and he described a testimony from a guy named Dan Morris, who in well, he starts off talking about Jimmy Doolittle, who was a guy that worked for President Roosevelt in the 1940s, and he had dispatched Doolittle to examine some UFOs sightings and stuff like that were going on, and Doolittle came back and said that the UFOs were interplanetary in nature, and so they came up with this office called the National Reconnaissance Office. And according to Dan Morris, who says that he had 38 clearances above top secret, and that the president doesn't even have these clearances, and that he was that it was something called the NRO, which was like secret. It was a secret intelligence group that wasn't even on the books for a long time, and Navy, Air Force, and NRO all Navy, Air Force, Navy intelligence, Air Force intelligence, and NRO all work together. I guess, and so I was thinking about that, and thinking about like the breakaway civilization and the idea that there's the quite clearly that's like a this testimony by this Dan Morris is evidence for a breakaway civilization, because something there's organized civilization craft going on outside the bounds of the highest level of governance that we have in our system, which is the presidency. And the highest office doesn't even know about some of the things that are going on. And so that's something pretty interesting. And so, yeah. Uh, I was also going to point out that Jimmy Doolittle and Dan Morris, this is another synchronicity. I think maybe this was the other synchronicity I was thinking of. There was a 3. Dan Morris, uh, I competed against a Dan and a Morris, who are very skilled, taller people that I competed against. So they're making fun of me and saying like Dan Morris has 38 clearance above the president because they're always saying I'm the president or some stupid thing like that. And Jimmy Doolittle, they're conferring to me as like Jimmy, like I don't do enough in the gym. I'm flabby, and so they call me Jimmy Doolittle. And so, but I work for Roosevelt. Like supposedly I still work for Roosevelt from World War II, and so they call me Jimmy Doolittle. And so, yeah, those are a couple of names that are relevant to my program that are like, okay, so I think they're pretty much time traveling. And so those are messages through time to me that nobody else will understand, but I will understand them. And yeah, I was just gonna say that I guess I'll talk about that in another one. All right, a little bit messed up one today, but thank you for listening to me. Goodbye.